Now I want to make it clear that I'm not hating on the new Zelda game. I think it looks delightful, I'm definitely going to play it. I've been hoping for a smaller 2D Zelda game for a long time now, and the way they've implemented Zelda to be playable is actually pretty nice. In past interviews, Aonuma has talked about why he hasn't put a playable Zelda up until this point. And his reason has always been because she needs to be able to do something that Link can't do. There's not a reason to do it if she's just going to play like Link. She can't just be running around with the sword. And having her be able to navigate environments, engage in combat, and solve puzzles with her Echo ability is a clever way of making her distinct and interesting. The game appears to have the potential to be very good. The little triangles over Tri's head seem to represent charges for Zelda's Echo ability. In the trailer we can see that pieces of furniture are costing her 1 Echo to summon, and monsters to fight for her are costing 2. So it looks like the ability is limited and may be upgradable, which opens up interesting possibilities for navigation and puzzle design. And so far this is the first trailer, we don't know if there's going to be other things involved with this. There could be some interesting dungeon design, where Zelda copies an item in a dungeon that interacts with dungeon elements in unique ways. There's a part in the trailer where you can see Zelda open the Echo slider menu, which seems to have every item that she's ever copied, as well as how many Echoes it takes to summon it. This menu looks exactly like Tears of the Kingdom's menu, and in the bottom left you can see that it can be sorted in a similar way. And based on this, it seems to me that this game is going to be similar to Tears of the Kingdom in that there won't be one solution to a puzzle. You'll have access to all of the Echoes that you've gained before, and depending on how those Echoes work, they might offer multiple solutions to the same issue. In Tears of the Kingdom, the limitless options of what you can use lessened the quality of the puzzle since you didn't really have to engage with them. Now I don't actually think that that problem is going to exist to the same degree in this new game. This ability is very different from Ultra Hand, it's very different than Auto Build, and the 2D environment by necessity will have restrictions to it that didn't exist in Tears of the Kingdom, and those restrictions will probably make puzzle design more central and far more important. And like I said before, we still haven't seen what the rest of the game is going to be like. There could be, in dungeons, Echoes that are only found in that dungeon, and maybe Echoes that are only found after a mini-boss that interact with the dungeon in a unique way, which would be effectively the same thing as a dungeon item. It would function essentially like a hookshot or a bow, giving Zelda a new way to interact with the world around her. And that dungeon echo could be made to be necessary to complete the dungeon. So overall, I'm quite hopeful. I will definitely play it, and I expect I will like it. But I also think that the game being the way it is has some unfortunate implications. I think Echoes of Wisdom is evidence that we're never getting a classic Zelda game again. Aonuma has repeatedly expressed his preference for the new Zelda style of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and his latest quote on the topic seemed very final. He said, "It's interesting when I hear people say that they prefer the old entries, because I am wondering, why do you want to go back to a type of game where you're more limited or more restricted in the types of things or ways you can play? But I do understand that desire that we have for nostalgia, and so I can also understand it from that aspect." End quote. Now, I think a lot of people took issue with this statement by Aonuma. I know I personally really didn't like it, because it implies that the only reason why you would want to play the old games or prefer the old games is nostalgia, which simply isn't true. I know teenagers that started in Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom that went back and played older Zelda games and prefer them. And even if they don't prefer them overall, many of them will admit that the dungeon design and stories were better in the past. And that, I think, is the answer to Aonuma's first question. He says, why do you want to go back to a game where you're more limited or more restricted in the types of things you can do or the ways you can play? And the answer to that is, because the dungeon designs and stories were better in the past. Because sometimes restrictions have benefits. In Breath of the Wild, when you're exploring the Great Plateau for the first time, there's a very specific spot that I remember, and that a lot of people remember and will gush about when they talk about it. While trying to get to a shrine, you can potentially run into the old man's cabin. The area is designed to guide you to try and cross a ravine. You don't have the paraglider at this point, and so you're meant to think of chopping down the tree to use it to cross the gap. And for me, it was such a wonderful moment. It lit my brain on fire with the possibilities of how they could do things like that across the whole game. But once you get the paraglider, a situation like this doesn't come up, because this situation was created by the restriction of not having it. If you had had the paraglider, there would have been no need of it, and even if you had thought of it, it would have been less efficient than simply gliding across. And so this wonderful moment that exists in my and many people's memories only exists because of limitations. Limitations are not inherently a bad thing, and player freedom is not categorically a good thing. That's my perspective. But my hope was that even if the 3D Zelda games like Tears of the Kingdom would continue down this path, Nintendo wouldn't abandon the classic Zelda formula entirely. I still had hope that they would release a 2D Zelda game in between their 3D releases, in the classic Zelda style. But now that Echoes of Wisdom has been announced, I no longer believe that's going to be the case. I see this game as a declaration by Aonuma. He's saying, this is as close to the classic Zelda formula as I'm willing to go. He has said before that he's not going back to the old way where there would be one solution to a problem, where there's one way to get a key and one key to a door, or one way to get an item and that item having one way to be used. Even in this small gameplay trailer, where we know very little about the game, it's emphasizing the fact that there are multiple ways to do things. It's emphasizing that you have lots of different echoes to tackle a problem. So while I absolutely expect that it's going to be more traditional, more in line with classic Zelda, it's still going to take the Breath of the Wild emphasis on player freedom and Aonuma's obsession with not restricting players. Now again, I need to emphasize, I don't think that this is necessarily a bad thing for this game. It looks very good, and I expect it's going to be very good. I just happen to think that there was value in the old way of doing things. And Echoes of Wisdom has made me realize that I should take Aonuma seriously when he says he's not going back. I believe him now, and it's left me somewhat disappointed. Anyway, that's the end of this video. Please unsubscribe and unclick your bell notifications. In the comments, I would appreciate if you told me that I am lacking taste and am just simply old and resistant to change. And if you're a classic Zelda fan, please tell the Tears of the Kingdom people that their open world is empty and boring. Basically, just say mean things to each other in the comment section. Mean enough that it will cause other people to reply, but not so mean that YouTube censors your comment and thus negates its effect. If I haven't alienated enough for you to do that, I'm sure I'll get to you in a future video. As always, thank you very much for watching.